it would be a real sad day if every painting company should look exactly the same. Like that would make a really boring job for guys like you and me, right? If every company was supposed to look exactly the same.
Yeah, I mean, if every company looked exactly the same, I would have a pretty boring podcast.
Right?
Welcome to the Painter Growth Podcast, where we help you scale your painting company in record time. Join us as we explore sales, marketing, hiring, finances, leadership, and more, everything that you need to know to scale and grow your painting business. I hope you enjoy and subscribe.
What's up, everybody? Mike Gore-Hickman here, founder of PainterGrowth.com, and you're listening to the Painter Growth Podcast. And I've said a lot of times at the start of episodes that we have a really special guest here. I mean it today. Brad, I'm not going to credit with starting my entrepreneurial journey because I was an entrepreneur from like when I was 10 years old, shoveling driveways and whatever. But Brad gave me my first real opportunity. He recruited me into student painting, was college pro at the time, and he basically gave me my first shot at like a real business and was my coach and mentor for the first 2-3 years of my true entrepreneurial journey. So, and now he's the founder and CEO of Bedrock Advising, based out of Okanagan.
We'll call it the Okanagan. Sure.
The Okanagan. Cool. Coaching and mentoring all types of trades businesses now. But Brad, I'm stoked to have you on, man.
Yeah, this is fun to reconnect. I mean, this is
about 13 years ago. You recruited me into College Pro Painters.
No, it's not 13 years ago.
Yeah. It was 14. Yeah, it was actually about 14 years ago. Yeah, it's 2009.
Okay.
And here we are, right? So what did you see in me at the time?
Oh, do we want to go there? I do remember I have memories of our interview process. And one of my favorite memories was you came in, speaking of your entrepreneurial bones that were all over and all throughout your body, you came in with your phone and you're showing me pictures from the weekend. And it was like you were jackhammering a driveway or something. And I could just like the energy and excitement that was all over your face about like, I found this gig all on my own. Obviously don't know a ton about jackhammering, but you could see like there was probably a little bit of blood, sweat, and tears that went into that over the weekend. And I could just see the like excitement and energy about what you were doing. I'm like, that's a guy I want to work with.
Yeah, it's funny. I think about that story often, actually, that specific, that jackhammering job. I had like an ad online on Craigslist that was like, kid with a truck, right? I'll do whatever you need. So guy calls me and he's like, I got a front step, 100-year-old front step that needs to be getting rid of. Can you give me a quote on it? So I go over there and look at it and I'm like I think about, okay, this is going to be a big job. I give him the biggest number that I can think of. I'm like, I'll do it for $600. Anyway, the dump fees ended up being more than $600. Plus, I had to rent this jackhammer, which I had no understanding of how to use at the time. And then, anyway, the older couple that hired me was so nice. They fed me lunch. They ended up paying me way more than the original bid because it took so long. And that was a lot of work. But
what I'm curious for you, what are the key lessons that stick with you today from that experience?
I think grit and determination and doing what you say you're going to do. Like after like I rented the jackhammer, I got started for the first 10 minutes and I was like, I am in way over my head. But I told the customer what I was going to do and I gave him a price. And even though it was a handshake agreement, I stuck to it. I said, I'm going to do it for this price. Yeah. And I might have whined a little bit along the way because I was young, but I did it.
I think every business owner, even every new business, I assume. I mean, I go through this every day where I'm like, oh, what did I commit to? Oops. But you have to deliver.
You have to see it. We've all underbid jobs, right? And there's times in my painting business, I way underbid jobs, almost lost my shirt a couple times, but you got to finish it. You got to see it through to the best of your abilities.
Yeah. Well, it's the trait you have to have if you want to run the business. If not, it's no shame in bowing out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you, one thing I want to talk about today, just to kind of get everyone on the hook for what we're going to get into, is really like making that transition from just running a job for yourself, even if you're not on the
Mm.
tools, even if you're just running around being an estimator, being a salesperson, being a project manager, part-time painter, to being the everything for everyone, to being a standalone business that has some like enterprise value that might be worth something one day. So I
Yeah.
want to talk about that. But like, before we do that, like, how did you get started in all of this? How did you get started in entrepreneurship and trades and in painting?
Well, I guess in the same place you did, right? Like in college pro painters. Unlike you, I don't know if I'm born entrepreneur, um, but I like some of the things that entrepreneurship gives you: with freedom, flexibility, being in control. So I ended up on the corporate side of a franchisor, which probably gets you like a baby toe in the entrepreneurship water. But my passion is more coaching and training and helping others, and so I've accidentally found myself as an entrepreneur in that space, rather than on purpose.
Yeah, that's funny. I mean, there's definitely a few routes that people take into getting into entrepreneurship. One is they can't find a job, so they start a company, right? That's one. That's
Yep.
not the route that you took, right? There's the way that I took, which is I know I'm an entrepreneur. I am
Yeah.
completely unemployable. I mean, literally, I was fired from Home Depot. I was fired from like the restaurant business, because I just am unemployable, right? But and then there's your way, which is kind of stumbling into it the
Yeah.
long way.
Taking
What have you
taking a
learned
swing.
about? What have you learned specifically about like not even about yourself, but about like, how do I want to describe it? Like, because of how you got brought into entrepreneurship, how does that affect like how you coach and how you convey systems and trainings to other contractors?
It's a great question, right? It's like, I look at myself as an entrepreneur, owning and running a business, and going along. I actually don't profile as an entrepreneur, and so that means something for my journey. I have a little bit less risk tolerance, and so if you look inside my business, that's stamped all over my business. There's things I don't like about, there's things about what's required to be an entrepreneur that I don't have, and you can actually see it stamped all over my business, and it still works. And I think when I think of like who I am as coach and consultant, and what kind of our company does, right, is it's there's a lot of great ideas out there, but it's really figuring out how do they work for you, who you are in your context. And so that's my lesson, right? I'm like, even a guy like me can run a successful business. There is a way, but if you ignore who you are and if you ignore your context, I think it sets you up for failure, right?
So what you're kind of saying is like, everyone, like, there's so many different ways to run a business. There's no exact like cut and dry model to do it. You need to kind of think like, see who you are as a person, not just
Yeah,
emulate what Tom's doing down the street. Like, do
yeah,
what feels right for you in the context of the market.
yeah. Like I get super skeptical when someone's like, "Do it this way," and you're like, no, like these are great things that worked for you, and there's so much lessons to be learned in that. And then I want to figure out, well, how do I apply that for me? Because like what works for Michael Gore Hickman, well, you've got your own unique way. I couldn't emulate you. Like your radio voice when you popped in here, there's no world in which I'm running a podcast someday. It's not in my cards. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I could take lessons from you, principles, and apply it to my business. But if I skip that step of like, well, what's the learning in that for me, and how do I do that? I think we end up with something that doesn't work if we skip that step. So
Do
it's
you
just
think
figuring.
there's, from a
Yeah, go
like a
ahead.
meta perspective, do you think there's a way that you can take a skill like that? Like, okay, I see how Mike runs a podcast and I see how he does his intro and he does all that. Is there a way that you can apply that on like a micro scale to your business?
I'm certain there would be. Yeah.
Not
Um,
even just like that, like the podcast skill, because that's a little whatever, but like just in general, seeing how someone does something differently and taking lessons and just applying them differently to your business.
I would hope so, right? Like, you know, what a sad day if it isn't, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
I
what
suppose.
I assume. There's maybe there's a couple handful of people listening here, right? And it's like they're listening because there's this hope that I can take some sort of thing from something and apply it to my world. My philosophy around coaching and consulting is really, how do we apply that to you? Inside our organization, we don't do a lot of like best practices, tips, and tricks. It really is, okay, what's the body of knowledge? And who are you, and who is the context of your business? And there's obviously some underlying principles in business that just are tried, tested, and true at the same time, right? For sure.
Yeah, not everything is going to work for everyone. You got to kind of find that right recipe for each person and their preferences and strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. It would be a real sad day if every painting company should look exactly the same. Like, that would make a really boring job for guys like you and me, right? If every company was supposed to look exactly the same.
Yeah, I mean, if every company looked exactly the same, I would have a pretty boring podcast.
Right? And there'd be a lot of unsatisfied customers out there. Because not every person who's looking to buy a paint job is looking to buy from the same company, right? There's different needs, different concerns. So that's a great thing.
So what if when we look at the skill, and because I think it is a skill of transitioning your business from having a job to having a real company. Like, before we start talking about like the specific day-to-day things that you need to do, like, what do you, again, I'm kind of struggling with how to phrase this question, but like, how do you strengthen that skill of like becoming a business owner?
What a great
You know what I
question.
mean? Like,
Going from I currently run a business to I'm now a business owner, because they're different things.
I'm being ran by my business, more like, right?
Or ran by my business, but like, I'm now a business owner. There's so many skill sets in like what that means. Like, what does it mean to be a business owner versus someone who gets run by their business?
I mean, if you think about the end result is I have a business that it's not that it doesn't require me, but I get to choose what I do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think having the freedom to choose to paint, to choose to do estimates, to choose to run paint and move ladders. Like, if you can decide you enjoy doing that, and so you choose to do those parts of the business, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
That is being a business owner.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you get to that point?
Well, how do you get to that point, right? That's the question. I don't know. Like, where do people get stuck in that transition? Like, what do you see?
I think a lot of people have trouble relinquishing control, and they if it has to get done right, I have to do it myself. And people are too scared to let their team fail, to let their team do something at a lesser quality than they would do it themselves, and use it as a learning opportunity. So instead, they just do it themselves.
Yeah. There's a control. There's a stuckness around control.
Yeah. So how do you flex that muscle?
Right. Great question. There's no like, here are the answers, right? Like, you're going to need to engage with who you are, not just as business owner, but who you are and how you hold on to control. You're going to have to want to, though. Like, there's going to be this is the biggest thing I always come to, like, to walk this transition from I run a business to I own a business. You're going to have to change as a person. You're gonna have to do like deep personal work on yourself. And there's a commitment that has to be made to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I find we all kind of take that a little bit lightly. Like, I've seen for myself and my business, like, I've had to really do a lot of work to get to here. As I said, like, I'm not naturally built to be sitting in this seat. It's a difficult journey.
Yeah.
But I don't know if people make that, like, draw that connection all the time of like, wow, I'm going to have to really not change who I am, but like really change behaviors and patterns and deep-seated beliefs. I'm going to have to challenge those, like, day in and day out.
One of the strategies that we talked about and kind of masterminded at our last in-person event was once if you're the person that everyone calls you to solve problems, right? Your painters always call you,
Yeah.
everyone calls you. First of all, don't answer the phone and like call them back in 20 minutes. See
Yeah.
if they can figure it out. And you'll find a lot of the time you'll get a text like 10 minutes later, never mind, figured it out.
Yeah.
Or just throw the question right back at their face. Right? Hey,
Yeah.
boss, how do I do this? How do
Yeah.
you think you should do it?
It's a great question.
Like, yeah, your team is very capable, a lot more capable than you probably give them credit for. So
Yeah.
challenge them, see where they break.
Yeah. I mean, it was like we know each other from the student painting background. I'd have anywhere from 15 to 25 student franchise owners. And, you can look at the minutes on your cell phone plan for the first 2 weeks of May versus, the first 2 weeks of June versus the first 2 weeks of July. And you see that transition, which is, you ask that, I don't know, it annoys people, but never answer a question. My wife tells me all the time, can you just answer it? Why do you have to answer every question with a question? I don't know.
Yeah.
Seems to work for me.
Yeah. What do you want to have for supper tonight?
It's a good way. It's a good way to lead.
So that is a leadership trait, not trait, but kind of tactic, right? And I think becoming this person who is capable of running a business that doesn't rely on them has to become a good leader. But you don't go out and do leadership. Right?
No.
It's like, I'm going to go do leadership today. Right? It's like a culmination of a whole bunch of small things that you do that kind of like become like, wow, he is a good leader because he does all of these different things. So like, what are some of the other easy wins that someone can make?
Yeah, I think there's some beliefs you have to have. And to like circle back to, this topic of control. Like, how do you lead if you don't fundamentally believe that the person that's working for you is capable of doing something? Like, to me, like, that's the belief number one. Like, I hold you capable as my painter, as my sub crew, as my production manager. I'm going to hold you capable of doing your job. I'm just going to believe that you can figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is, like, to me, like, leadership first bedrock you put on the pile. Like, you need to actually fundamentally believe you're capable, whether you are or not today.
Yeah. I mean, that goes for a lot of things, right? Like if you're going to say jump across a little gap, you have to believe that you can jump across that gap before you try.
Yeah.
If you hurt yourself for a second, you're going to fall on your face.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that's where I think you get stuck with like control or micromanagement. It comes from this belief that the person they need you. They don't know the answer. They don't know what's best for them. They can't figure it out. That's micromanagement. Mm-hmm. Leadership is, and don't get me wrong, that's micromanagement. I believe in management. Management's a great thing. Leadership is, I think you're capable. And a lot of people,
if they're not capable, helping them solve their skill gap.
Yeah. Helping them solve it themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's leadership.
I mean, there's going to be some times where just training is required, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Identifying those times like, oh, I don't. Anyway. Yeah.
Well, I'm with you, right? Like you see this in our industry, the training, consulting, coaching industry, this like idea that you should, the only tool belt in your, your leadership tool belt is like a coaching leadership tool belt. And like, that's nonsensical, right? Like, yeah, there's a training tool, there's also a management tool. There's a performance management tool. That's a really good tool. There's all these tools and you're going to have to use all of them. But I think when you transition, when we're talking specifically about this transition from I'm just running a business to I want to own a business, you have to pull out the leadership tool, the coaching tool. I don't think you get there without that tool. And that tool being really developed. And one of the principles there is like, I hold people as capable of doing their job.
So something that you're really good at is, and that's actually a good description. So teaching someone a skill is really coaching them, and being a good coach is being a good leader. So can you kind of like juxtapose the difference between just training and coaching?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Mike, right? Like distinguishing between what these different tools are, right? Like training is a tool where like I'm just going to tell you how to do something, right? So like if I'm not a golfer, so I think you probably golf a little bit. You could teach me how to golf, right? And you like, here's how you hold the golf club and here's how you swing. That's teaching. Teaching is training, right? And that's a great tool if I have no idea what I'm doing and I want to learn, right? Like you've taken me out to a golf course. I can guarantee I have no idea what I'm doing there, but I'm like, Mike, I really want to learn how to do this. And you're going to tell me everything about golf. And I'm going to be like, cool, I'm going to be a sponge. I'm going to soak it up.
You probably get
Great.
Jesse Tarrant actually to teach you that.
We'll get Jesse out there, right?
Yeah.
We got a really good trainer, right? But you're going to train me, and that's teaching, right? I have no idea what I'm doing, and I've expressed a sincere desire that I want to be taught. So it works great. Coaching is like, I'm concerned about getting better at something, but like I've got some form of, I'd call it stuckness. And so coaching is a combination of questions and challenges and analogies where you as the person being coached are going to make all the calls, right? So if I'm Tiger Woods, he's a golfer, right? And Tiger Woods already knows how to golf, right? You don't have to teach him. But
there are no fundamentals that he still needs to learn.
There's no fundamentals. No, there's no fundamentals, right? But someone needs to coach him to performance. And so that looks a lot different, right? These are actually really great. Will Smith movie, Legend of Bagger Vance. If you want to see what coaching looks like as opposed to training, just go watch that movie. It is a great example. I love that movie. That's what.
How about Coach Carter? Have you seen Coach Carter?
I haven't seen it. That's a football one, right?
Basketball. Samuel Jackson. I feel like that's a good coaching example as well.
Right? So that's coaching, but then we also have like managing. And managing is a skill set that's completely different, right? Like manager versus coach. Like the manager is going to call the shots. When you're in coaching mode, you call no shots. When you're in managing mode, you call shots, right? It's like, this is the goal. What'd you learn? Here's some advice. Like I'm giving advice. And now when I'm starting to give advice, like I'm going to tell you what to do. Now I've crossed into some form of manager or consultant. That's why like consultants are professional advice givers. I'm going to tell you what to do. Really great if you don't know what to do and want to be told what to do. If you don't want to be told what to do, bad tool, right? Like let's go back to our coaching tool. And so, one of these, we go back to this transition, right? From I run a business to I own a business. You have a more defined skill set where you know which tool you're using. You understand why you're using it with the person in front of you. And so you're developing a bit of I call it an executive tool belt, which sometimes you just haven't had the opportunity to get that tool belt yet when you've just been out running a business, right? We all went through that.
There's some really great ways to teach some things I think that people could use to learn how to like identify or how to get into that coaching and leadership perspective. And I would say like situational leadership and the 1 Minute Manager that Ken Blanchard. Like I think that's a great intro. It's a very small book, very quick, very fun read. Yeah. But then that kind of gives you the idea of what the different types of leadership and coaching are and then how to use them.
Yeah, like you think of the leading situationally model, right? Like, when we talk about directive or being directive, like that's kind of a little bit more like training. Whereas when we talk about, say, like supporting, that's actually a little bit more, but we mean by coaching.
What are the different types of situational leadership? So you said like being directive. There's 4 quadrants, isn't there?
Yeah, is it directive, coaching, supporting, and delegative, right?
Okay. Yeah, I think that's right. Can you just quickly brief on each one of them and how they kind of work with each other when each would be useful?
I think the idea of the model, right? If we take someone's like, I've never done something before, so I'm going to come work for you as a painter, and I've never touched a paintbrush before. And so like you'd consider me like an eager learner, and I'm well aware that I don't know anything, and I also don't know anything. So you can be pretty directive with me, right? Like we can train you. You don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're doing, and you're pretty excitable.
Hold the roller handle like this, go all the way to the top, come all the way bottom, make sure there's no lap lines.
Perfect. And then we get into doing the task and stuff goes like, things don't work, right? So you get this person who's now like, they have some experience, like a little bit of experience or knowledge. And they get, you see that all the time. It's like, I've tried it that. Like you hear someone, this is the clue, right? If someone says, well, I tried it that way, it doesn't work. It's like, boom, the second you hear that, put down the training tool and pick up a new tool, right? Because that training tool, like training someone who doesn't believe something's going to work, and you get that, like, I've tried that doesn't work. Don't try to train that person. They're telling you, I don't want to be trained. So you're going to have to adjust your style. And so in that model, they call it coaching, which is, asking them questions. And I mean, sometimes, it reads like manipulation. So, but, it's coaching. And the idea in that model, when they say coaching, I actually don't like the word, because to me, it's more managing in that quadrant. Because at the end of the day, you don't have a ton of experience. I'm going to still make the call. Me as boss, right? It's like, we'll talk about it. I'm not just going to tell you, like, we'll talk about it. We'll process through it. We'll share ideas. But at the end of the day, I need you to do it this way because you're new. You don't know. So I wouldn't actually, I don't like the word coaching there, because I'm like, that's not coaching. I'd call that quadrant managing myself.
Okay.
But then you keep going, right? And the person gets better. And now we've got this like person who knows how to do their job. And maybe sometimes they just screw up. I always use the sports analogy. It's like a guy who's scored a lot of goals and been a star before, but he's in like a bit of a funk, right? So like, say you're that guy. You're like, I've been the professional top goal scorer in the league, and I haven't scored in 7 games. Do we want to teach that person how to do a wrist shot? I don't know about you. He's going to slap it in my face, right? Like,
yeah.
So no, we're gonna support that. So they call it supporting in that quadrant, which is actually more what I'd call coaching, which is, I'm going to hold you capable. You get to make the decisions. I'm here with some questions and some thoughts and some analogies to help you work through where you're stuck on your performance. But you're still going to make the calls because you know what you're doing. And then we get to the delegative quadrant, which is more, your head game is in, and you also still have the skills. So we're going to let you just run. That's that model. There's things I like about it, some things I don't like about it.
Yeah, I think the supportive is like, when you're talking with Tiger Woods earlier, like that's definitely where Tiger Woods would be, right? Like his coach is definitely a supporter. Like, okay, let's problem solve this like together, right?
Well, they talk about in the model. It's like, if you think of the XY axis, it's capability, so skill and knowledge, right? So like, if you have high skill and knowledge, and then there's what they call commitment, which is such a loaded word, but what they really mean is willingness and motivation to the task. So like, I could be fully committed to golf, but I might not be willing to, hit with a certain club, because I've struggled with my driver. So like, I'm just not willing. I'm fully committed to golf. I'm not willing and motivated to use my driver today. And so that's what they're in that model. They're talking about capability, skills, and knowledge, and they're talking about commitment, which is willingness and motivation, and it's all to a task, like a specific task. That's how, people can go read the book if they're interested.
Yeah, I think the analogy kind of falls apart with golf, because it is non-linear with the time spent practicing golf to how good you get. And any golfers listening, you absolutely, like, you can golf for 30 years and still not be any good.
Yeah, probably. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I guess that's also the difference between doing something and doing something, practicing something diligently with a specific outcome, like intentionally practicing and training versus just doing something, right? Those are two different skills or two different things.
Yeah, well, I think it's what people call deep practice, right? And people I love that. Like, doing something doesn't increase your skill.
Yeah, like I play a lot of bullet chess on my phone. So like 1 minute chess game, very fast, does not improve my chess skill at all.
Yeah.
But back when I had more free time, I would read chess books, and I would do puzzles, and I would study openings. And like, while I was doing that, diligent study, I would go, like, my rating would go up. But now I'm just playing bullet. I'm just kind of garbage. I do it for fun, but my skill doesn't improve.
Maybe your skill of making fast decisions improves.
No way of deciding. Well, I mean, if that skill would improve, then my chest rating should go up in theory.
In theory.
So we've covered some different types of coaching. How do we, like, when we look at our team, and I was actually just talking to someone a little bit earlier, and so their their employees, and maybe it's an unfixable issue, but their employees seem to be doing something, as an example, doing things without a lot of foresight. They're putting ladders, in the walkways. They're, just like setting up the job without thinking a few steps ahead.
Yeah.
So with this, someone like that, how would you approach that? I mean, sure, a lot of people listening have painters who, are like that. How would you approach that conversation or that skill of helping them have better foresight and become more forward-thinking employees?
It's a great question, right? Like every bone in my body is yelling gas, which is a great acronym I got from a client, actually, which I don't know what language I'm allowed to use on your podcast here, but that's give
Whatever
a
the fuck
unit.
you want.
That's your give a shit meter, right?
Yeah.
And so every bone's like, oh, that problem is they don't have the give a shit meter is not revving high enough, right? They need more gas.
I
But
like that.
maybe, right? Maybe, like that. I think that's like, I would say 99% of business owners, like that's where our head goes. Like that's the assumption we make, right? It's gas. I don't know. But the one thing that you get from that situational leadership model that I love, right? The first question, right? Is like, is this a capability issue, which is skill and knowledge? Or are we dealing with a commitment issue, which is willingness and motivation? And again, like a commitment is such a loaded word. Like I don't mean like they're committed to their job, committed to your company. I mean like they have a willing, a confidence issue, right? Like am I willing and motivated to, make that decision, right? Like sometimes people don't make decisions because they don't have confidence. So that's the first question, right? Is like, what are we dealing with? Like, are we dealing with a capability issue? Or are we dealing with like a commitment issue?
Mm-hmm. Like, do
And
they
I mean,
want to get better, or are they just kind of, is their give a shit meter running low?
yeah, like do they have a confidence issue? Is there give a shit meter? Do they know how to be better? Do they need some guided practice? Like the answer is like, I guess I'm getting at it. Like if I was to give advice, I'd be like, go have a conversation with that person and put aside your assumptions for a minute about what you think the issue is. Because for me, I'm like, my assumptions are screaming, well, it's gas. And my experience is like, sometimes it's not actually. Like you get into the conversation, you're like, you learn something.
Yeah. It's funny. I was
Yeah.
talking to a client a couple of months ago, and this story just popped in my head. He was having issues with this painter. The painter was like being unreliable, and he was making excuses and all this stuff. And my client was like, maybe this guy just doesn't want to be here. Like maybe he's just
Yeah.
not happy
Yeah.
at work. And he's like, Mike, what do I do? What do I do? I'm like, well, have you talked to him about this issue?
I think we're hitting at a really important part. Like, like I said, like I think one principle as we walk this path from I run a business or it runs me to I own a company is the development of an executive tool belt of skills that I know them, I can label them, and I understand which one to pull out and why. Another one is like curiosity. Like instead of like making assumptions or thinking it's this way, you have to like go look under the rock and be curious and kind of go like, well, yeah, like I'm going to have all these employee issues. Now that I have this business and I've got 30 employees, I'm going to have a lot of conversations. And there's so common this orientation I hear about business owners. I don't want to do that conversation. It's a waste of time. It's like so much this, so much that. I'm like, man, if you can't get to the point where you're curious and want to have those conversations, that business is not going to be an asset worth any money.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be curious and want to have those conversations because you're never going to learn what you need to learn to move your business forward. You're going to make a bunch of assumptions.
A lot of people don't, I mean, we're talking about leadership, we're talking about coaching, but a lot of people don't really do any management. Once they get their team up and running, they're painting houses, they're doing jobs, they really don't do any management. They don't do weekly check-ins, they don't have a scorecard, they don't have expectations, accountabilities, like any of that. What should an ideal employer-employee communication cadence look like in a good management scenario?
Well, there should be two cycles going on. There should be a performance management cycle, and there should, which is what we're talking about right there, right? Which is like we've got a scorecard, we've set some goals, we've got alignment on it, we've got some sort of dashboard or measurement of results, and there's some sort of cadence of, a huddle, one-on-one performance meeting, and then there's like the formal review. So that's our performance management cycle. And then we should also have a leadership cycle, which is a little bit different, right? Like that's more just like what we're talking about right before, which is like understanding the person. So that's a whole other cycle. But like inside the performance management cycle, it's like, what's the cadence? I don't know, right? Like I come from a world where we did weekly one-on-ones. I like one-on-one because I think you can learn more about the person, but you could do group meetings. They accomplish the same thing, like, and like, is it every day? Is it every week? Is it every 2 weeks? It's going to depend on context. I mean, the more green someone is, well, I think I want to do it more often. The more experience, maybe it doesn't have to be as often. If I like, we come from a world where we like did 99% of our revenue in 4 months, right? You're going to want to meet often, right? Because you've got this short runway. But if I'm doing, 8.3% of my revenue every month, I've got a longer runway. I don't need to make as rapid change. So maybe I don't meet as often. So like, I think those are some of the things they consider about what is the cadence or what should it be? It's like, well, what's the knowledge level or experience of the employee? And what's my runway length? Or like, how quickly do I need to make change? Like the difference between startup and 30-year-old company.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to have a different cadence in their performance management cycle. But you're at every point, right? Like nobody does management when they make this. They go from like, I'm on the tools, I'm running the business, and now I'm like on the beach in Mexico, sipping some sort of great drink. And it's like there's some stuff in between there, right?
Yeah, a lot of that is management.
A lot of it, yeah, you're right. A lot of it's performance management.
So if you're doing a one-on-one with a team member, and say you get into a cadence in your business where you're meeting with each one of your team members, each one of your painters once a week. It doesn't have to be long, 15, 30 minutes max, right? Once a week. Yeah. What type of I know like everyone could go out and they could read what's it called? The Rocket Fuel, the other one.
Traction.
Yeah, you could go read Traction and kind of get some ideas there. But to just go through all that, what type of agenda should someone have on a weekly one-to-one with a team member?
I mean, you can pull up whatever template or model you want, right? It's going to be like review last week goal, set goal, whatever. Like you've got templates, I've got templates, Traction's got templates for days, sure. Right? I don't know, what's the outcome of the meeting? It's like, what's the outcome?
To make sure that metrics make sure they're being productive, make sure they're happy, make sure they understand what's going on.
Yeah. It's my biggest mentor. I don't know if he knows he's my biggest business mentor or not. Former VP of a company we worked at. He always, one of the things he always said about one-on-ones that I love, right? He's like, did the other person have a good time? Like, was it fun? And so I remember I'd be driving home from work after like a one-on-one. We had a one-on-one meeting, and he'd call me, and it'd be like laugh. And I'd always ask him like, "Hey, I thought our performance meeting was pretty good today." Like, because I knew he would call people if he thought, like, he always said like, after your one-on-one meeting, you got to ask yourself 2 questions: did the person have fun, and do you think they're going to hit their goal or not? And if the answer is no, for goodness sakes, call them. Like, don't wait a week to find out, right? And so, like, I don't know, whatever the model you're using, like, I love those 2 questions.
I like that for an outcome. That's super simple. Just cuts through it all.
Have fun. And like, fun is important, right? Because especially in something like performance meetings, like, you'll see this in an organization where like the management absolutely loves the performance meeting cycle, but like every employee despises it, right? They don't want to be there because it's this, someone's taken the template off the shelf that they've been taught by whatever book or consulting company of like, here's this rigidity of this meeting. And like everyone hates going, right? Because nobody was like, sure, we want to follow that agenda, but like it's got to be fun and enjoyable so that somebody wants to show up next week and engage in it, instead of like show up with the attitude of like, I'm just going to tell Mike what he needs to hear so like he leaves me alone because I don't want to get my head ripped off.
Mhm.
So I'm like, it's got to be fun, and not rigid while still being rigid.
Yeah. While still accomplishing what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. But you know, I mean, I've done 100,000 hours of one-on-one meetings. We've done a lot together, I would think.
Yeah.
And you know, like when I reflect back, I'm like, I bet Mike hated 99% of those meetings. Right. And or like, you know, I'm sure I've got subordinates that would say that about, you know, our meetings. And you know, when I reflect back, it's like it's the rigidity of like, what's the goal? The goal is 40 hours of painting. Or what's the plan? Well, I'm going to do this. Boring, right? Like it's boring.
It can also be boring if the person that you're doing your one-to-one meeting with doesn't see the reason for it, right? If
Yeah.
they're like just coming in and they just want to be at their 40 hours in and that's it, like it can be hard to motivate someone to want to do that. So that kind of ties into performance pay too. I think that having performance pay in almost every role is pretty important.
Can be, yeah. Can be.
Can be.
That's
Elaborate.
a whole other conversation. Like that's a rabbit hole.
We got time. So my
I
opinion,
love performance pay. Don't get me wrong. Like I love performance pay. So we come from a world where it was piece rated, right? And you would ask me like, is that fantastic? And is that the way to do it? Well, absolutely the way to do it. Like piece rate is like, what could be more motivating and fair for an employee to get paid exactly what they earned? I produced 80 hours. Doesn't matter if it took me 60, 70 or 50, I get my 80 hours times whatever my pay is. I was running a business where it came out throughout the whole organization. You know, we had 300 painters where it was like 290 of them, their perspective of the piece rate, it was there to take advantage of them. And we actually started testing and shifting people to hourly, and we were getting more productivity on hourly.
Why do you think that is? Was it bad estimating?
Everything flew in the face of what I thought it should happen, right? It was like every bone in my body is like, that should not happen that way. But they were stuck on, you know, my take was like, stuck on, you know, like, well, they didn't get the results from the performance-based pay, so they weren't winning. So then this is the challenge with like, I love performance-based pay, but if people aren't winning enough, immediately they go to, this thing's rigged, this is out to get me, this is the, you know, some like corporate thing to like make sure the corporation makes more money. And so that's my challenge with performance-based pay. You set up these performance-based pay structures and nobody's winning, and it'll actually do more harm than good.
Mm-hmm. If people are consistently coming in below.
Yeah. So you have to be winning.
Yeah.
And
or you have to rig the system in your employees' favor. Right?
Yeah,
pay them when they win, but take the hit when they lose.
Yeah, I was working with a company the other day. We were unrolling. It took us we started in March of last year. It's like, I want to do performance-based pay. I'm like, I told them, like, if we put performance-based pay in right now with this group of people, with what's going on in your business, they're all going to quit because you guys are losing a lot and you're going to lose for the next 9 months. We had to go, like, we went through pretty painful, hard decisions, restructuring. And like, we're sitting here today. I'm like, oh, like they've exceeded their numbers for 3 months now. Complete night and day turnaround. And they're like, okay, we're going to do performance-based pay in January. And I was like, for goodness sakes, like, rig it. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, let's take the 50K off in January and like, let's spread that throughout the year. You know, we'll get it back later. If they win in January and then they win again in February, it'll take care of itself. Mm-hmm. But with what this team has gone through, if they lose in January, the whole implementation of it it's sewered.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, you have to have some big wins at the start, so you can get bought into the system.
Yeah. So, you know, like that's a principle in performance-based pay, right? It's like, yes, I agree. Like it's great. I love performance-based pay, but it's oversimplifying it to say it always works.
Fair. I mean, that's pretty much, there's no, Jedi doesn't deal in absolutes.
Yes, I love that. It's a great line, man. Like, right?
There's no one size fits all approach, but I think a lot of the time performance pay is good, or finding a way to do performance pay in your
Oh
business,
yeah.
at least to incentivize people, or have bonuses, not even necessarily piece rate, like production quality.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, now you're trying to figure it out in the long run to get it in place, but sometimes it's cart before horse to start with it.
Yeah.
It is my experience. Like I've seen it not work so often.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're sitting there going, like, why? This is great. Like this is the way it should work. But I love your line, right? Like, if you deal in absolutes and you just hear like performance-based pay, and it's like, yeah, if you're just going to go implement it because everyone says it works, you're gonna, well, we'll see how it turns out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about, the difference between coaching and training, and teaching, right? We talked a little bit about skill transfer. What else are, like, if we could dig into like one more required skill that someone needs to like become that, or not even become that leader, but start becoming that leader who could maybe one day have a business that runs without them? What kind of comes to mind?
I mean, it's probably pretty tired and obvious, but like there has to be a commitment to structure and systems. Like you've got to get out of the like the gunslinger Wild West mentality of like just figure everything out, right? And sure, you can go way overboard with like an over reliance on trying to create systems to solve every problem. I'm not one of those people, but like you've got to put some structure in place to make things repeatable.
Mm-hmm. I
And
mean, I don't
you
think
have
it's
to
as obvious as not as obvious to everyone as you think.
maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's super important to have systems.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
how would you recommend someone who doesn't have an SOP library? For what anyone listening, that's standard operating procedure, like a place where you keep all of your systems and processes. So if someone doesn't have one of those, they've never written a system before, they just are running their business, maybe doing between 20 and 100,000 a month without any written and documented systems, where do you start?
Once per quarter, having like, what's the biggest initiative in your business right now, right? Like, say I'm sitting here and it's like, you know what? I'm the thing holding our business back is lead generation. All right, you're going to do a bunch of stuff over the next 3 months, I'm assuming, to try to get more leads. While you're doing that initiative, systemize it. Work on that because you're doing that work anyways, right? So if you're doing the work anyways, you might as well systemize it as you go. Like
so when you say systemize, you mean just open up a Word document or write down what you're doing and how you did it?
Yeah, sure. Or even better, like get someone else in the company to do it. I don't know. I mean, go to ChatGPT, plug it in, get 80% of the way and edit from there. Like things are, it's always less work than people think it is, right? Like they're like, oh, SOP, structure, systems, and we build it up to be this big thing. It's like, it doesn't have to be a big thing, right? It's just like, just write stuff down. It's not a finished product. You're going to change it in a month, 2 months, a year, or 2 years. Like, I don't know if you hear this all the time. I've heard this all the time. Once all my SOPs are done, or once I have the library, as if there's like this finish line. I'm like, the second you get to the finish line, someone like changes your CRM, makes an update to it, comes out with a new paintbrush, a whole new line of paint. Like everything's always changing. There's no finish line to your system. So what? So like just
You find a better way to do it. You remember about something else. Like
the second you think you found the right way to do it, like that's a sad day. Because now you're in fixed mindset instead of growth mindset, right? You're like, this is perfect. We just stop. So I always like laugh. I'm like, there's no finish line. So I was just relax, do one thing at a time, like whatever you're working on. And it'd be, oh, I needed a process for this because this happened one time. I'm like, really? I don't know. We'll wait and see if it happens again. Like, build an SOP for something that happened, went wrong 3 times. That's kind of my rule.
There's also like working hard versus working on the wrong thing versus the right thing. Like I had a client who had no work and he was writing an SOP on how to do interior paint jobs.
Yeah, right.
Well, like we gotta get our priorities sorted out, right? Like you gotta be marketing, you gotta be doing estimates. This is not a priority right now.
So I've seen this. I don't know if you see this, like as people take this transition from working in the business to working on the business, which is one of the lines I absolutely hate. I love it, but I hate it at the same time. So I'm working in the business and now I'm working on the business because I own this asset. There's this like, my time ought to be spent in, I guess Stephen Covey would call it quadrant 2, right? Like non-urgent, highly important tasks. And I should spend 95% of my time there. And we demonize quadrant 1, right? Like highly important, highly urgent tasks, like getting work. I'm like, what on earth is wrong with spending 100% of your work on highly important and highly urgent tasks? What is wrong with that?
I mean, there's not, I operate my business in that, but not even like I put urgency on myself, even for things that are not urgent.
Sure. But I don't know. I live 95% of my days in quadrant 1. Now you got to get to quadrant 2 once in a while, because that keeps you out of like the quadrant 3 in Covey's model, right? But I see this is like common for me as people walk this transition. They're like, I need to do only proactive stuff. I'm like, no, I don't think, guys running multi-million-dollar companies are only doing proactive work. There's lots of highly important, highly urgent tasks that need to get done. Mm-hmm. And if you ignore those, your business is going to crumble, right? Like as you said, like put down the SOP and like go book a job.
Yeah, but if you're doing these highly important, highly urgent things, it's not a bad idea to document along the way if it's a repeatable thing that you do in your business often.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And then you get into that point where you don't have to do those things anymore. You have an estimator doing your highly important, highly urgent estimates, right? And you have a marketer doing your highly important, highly urgent flyer drops and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, and like they're doing it, so like I don't know, like get them to document it. Yep. Like, it goes back to that thing you said about control, right? Like we hold this control where like, only I could document the procedure. I'm like, I don't know, if I run a painting company, I got a bunch of painters. They're the right people to document the painting process. What do I know? I'm not out there every day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could, come up with a bunch of marketing procedures from like 17 years ago from what I think someone should do for a painting company, but like, I'm not out there. You tell me.
Yeah, exactly. And then what a little tip that we've heard is go out there with an audio recorder or with your phone and take an audio recording or a video of someone doing a skill that you want to document. And then transition that into a written document, or have an assistant.
Yeah. Well, like just film it. I guess, one of the places I get stuck all the time, and I think a lot of people get stuck, is like, it needs to look great. And I'm like, does it though? Like, if that's the thing holding you up, like it looks great from just getting something on paper or getting a quick recording, like,
yeah,
you can always redo it later.
You don't need formatting, especially at the start.
Not in today's world, right? Like people watch this, like this is how we consume information now, podcast style or Twitter, right? Like there's not the same expectation of like production value.
Mm-hmm. And it's not like it's an external document. It's just for you and your team. So
yeah, it's cool. And then someone comes in and is like, I think this could be done better. And it's like, awesome. Here's the recording. Go nuts. Like, go replace it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So how are you currently offering your coaching skill to the contractor community? What does that look like right now? What does Bedrock look like?
A classic membership community. Our core product to our members is a one-on-one service. And it's really a balance between these things. Like we do consulting, we do, professional coaching, we do business training, but it's a one-on-one model. So this is what we do. And we're not exclusively in the contracting space. I think based on where I've come from, there's a lot of contracting industries inside our membership, but it's not exclusive.
So if someone wants to reach out and chat with you, how should they do that?
BedrockAdvising.com. Jump on there, learn a little bit about us. There's a link to a calendar. Anyone can jump on my calendar, and if you can't find space, just email us, call us. We'll meet with people. We love what we do.
Well, I can
Yeah.
put I'll put your contact link in the description of this podcast, wherever it is, YouTube, Spotify, and if anyone wants to reach out to Brad, I mean, you guys heard it just today. Smart dude, knows a lot about business. Saw some hope in me when I was 19 or 20.
I love what you're doing with this, right? Like this is cool. And a lot of good content from what I've seen, and I think making a big impact on a lot of great painting companies out there. So keep up the good work.
I'm working on it. This is just the beginning.
Yeah, good. I'm excited to see what you come up with because yeah, you guys are doing some cool stuff.
Sounds good, Brad. Well, thanks again for coming on, man. That was hugely valuable. I mean, I got a whole page of notes here, so stoked to chat with you again. And sorry,
to keep cutting you off. Fun conversation. So thanks for having me, and it was good to catch up.
Thanks, Brad.
Awesome.
Until next time.
Thanks for listening to the Painter Growth Podcast. If you want to grow your painting business, go to www.paintergrowth.com or click on the top link in the description. Talk soon.